go ahead and get started. Definitely want to thank everyone for coming out. Obviously, this is our Navigating the Graduate School Application Process Workshop. We're pre-professional advising. My name is Anthony Catuzis. I know I definitely recognize some faces. I think I've met with a number of you guys already, and that's excellent. I'm also an advisor for the undergraduate students in College of Allied Health Science programs, in addition to working with folks that are going on into PT, PA programs, OT programs. So for today's workshop, the first thing we're going to get going doing is like a step-by-step process as far as what we need to be thinking and doing if we're going to apply to a graduate program. And then next, after me, we have Kevin Flebby from Kaplan Test Prep. Kevin will give a presentation on the GRE. If some of you guys are taking any kinds of different tests, I'm sure that he's pretty knowledgeable about those as well, and certainly we'll try to answer everyone's questions if you have them. After that, we're definitely going to have someone from the Career Center speak and do a presentation on writing a personal statement. As of right now, I don't think she's here yet. So if she doesn't show up, I mean, I'll answer any questions that I can. Certainly, I've helped a lot of students write those. I've written them myself, having to get into graduate programs. So, there's definitely some basic ideas that we can kind of follow in crafting a good one of those and utilizing the resources that ECU provides and pays for to help our students. So. All right, got our website behind us. If you haven't registered with us, please feel free to go to ecu.edu/PPAC, click on register, and you can register with our center, and that'll get you put on our listserv where you'll start receiving emails and things like that. A lot of people are probably already on there. So. All right, now we gave you guys a flash drive at the very beginning. On the flash drive, there's a pretty large document, expansive, on things to follow, ideas, learning more about yourself and who you are, and the whole deal building up to applying for medical programs. It's a pretty expansive document, like I said, probably about 45 pages. A portion of it is I'm going to go over here today. So if you guys want to access this handout, it is in that document. We certainly hope it'll be helpful to you. Some of it may or may not apply to you based on mostly juniors and seniors in here, I assume. Okay, yeah. All right, some of it is more geared towards, hey, maybe I'm a freshman or sophomore and I'm thinking about it. If you guys are kind of full speed ahead, some of it won't be exactly appropriate, but definitely we feel that this part will. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we created this nice handout. If you're thinking about applying to graduate school, it's a step-by-step guide. So, number one, obviously, step one is figuring out which program you're interested in. Obviously everybody here is going to be applying to a health program. Can I see a show of hands? Speech language pathology, physical therapy, occupational therapy. How about some of the rehab programs, counseling, anything like that? Medical school, dental school, medical? Okay, all right, cool. So a good PA program, did I skip that one? Yeah. All right. So we've got a diverse group in here. Many different programs, but it's all about figuring out which one you're kind of moving towards first. In my opinion, I feel like a different program is not a good backup plan to the one that you really want. I think that you have to really tailor yourself towards whatever field that you're trying to break into. I think sometimes we meet with students that are thinking, I'd really like to apply to occupational therapy. But if I don't get into an OT program, perhaps I will apply for our graduate counseling program, or maybe I'll really look into that as my backup plan. We feel that determining which field you want to be in and then tailoring yourself to that field, and instead of having a backup plan that's a different program, applying to a number of places is the idea. So figure out what type of program you're interested in. The Career Center can kind of help with that. All you guys pretty much know where you're going at this point, so that's really good. All right. Next thing you got to do is look at the requirements for those programs, and specifically, what those schools' requirements are, and the ones that you're interested in. I think most programs are going to have pretty similar admissions requirements, but you'll see them differ from minimum GPA. You'll see them differ from minimum GRE scores, or this occupational therapy program might require 2 psychologies. Another occupational therapy program might require extra psychologies. Brody School of Medicine in the future is going to be requiring biochemistry. Never did that previously. Other schools probably not going to require biochemistry. So, you've got to look at the requirements for some, whatever your main goal program is, but obviously start getting a feel for what else is out there. Because those schools are going to have prerequisites and requirements that are unique to those schools. So a great resource that you guys can do is there's a professional association for every field. If it's occupational therapy, you've got the AOTA. If it's PT, it's APTA. So doing some research there and finding out which professional association works with the area that you're interested in, going to their website, looking up programs by state, that can be very, very helpful as well. All right. After you start to get a feel for, well, I know what program I'm interested in, and I know what type of program I'm interested in, what field I'm interested in, and I know what some of the schools are that are out there. Now I'm starting to dig deeper into the process. Volunteering and shadowing, I think, is really good. And this, to be honest with you, at step 3 could be step 1. It absolutely could be, and it probably should be. If you haven't yet, volunteering and shadowing is very, 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 very important. Absolutely is. Most programs are going to have a minimum, if they require shadowing, they're going to have a minimum requirement. It might be 25 hours, might be 50 hours. If it's our physical therapy program, for example, there's a minimum requirement of 100 hours of shadowing. If it's our occupational therapy program, it's about a 25-hour minimum exposure to the field of occupational therapy. If it's a physician assistant program, that number of patient contact hours could be up to 1,000, possibly even higher, depending on where you're looking. And so certain programs kind of have different requirements there, and so you want to start getting some exposure to that field so that you can start meeting some of those programs' requirements. Other things like volunteer experience, not necessarily going to be required on an application, but we feel very, very strongly and adamantly that if you're applying to a medical school program per se and you don't have any volunteer experience, that's going to be the Achilles heel of your application. It's the weak spot. And so volunteering, especially in some of the medical programs, is very, very, very important. Anyone started doing any volunteering or shadowing yet? Okay, all right, excellent. That's really good. And just to let you know, it doesn't even necessarily have to be medical. I mean, there's a difference between volunteering and shadowing. Shadowing is where you're following around a professional in that field and you're observing what they do on a day-to-day basis. We're going to differentiate that between, volunteering, which is any form of service. It shows that you care, that you're interested in helping out the community, that you like working with people, that you like helping people. And again, I think most programs are going to either require it or want to see some of that. That's sort of what helps give you like a more full and complete application. So definitely important there, volunteering, shadowing, and differentiating between those as well. And you want to be able to pull something from those experiences. You want to be able to learn something technical, get that technical information when you're shadowing. If you're volunteering, I almost think you want to learn the right lesson. I think sometimes when we do interviews with students and they can't give us one positive reflection of what they did from helping feed homeless at this shelter or doing, that almost makes you look bad in an interview. I mean, you want to be able to pull something from that, explain why it's meaningful, and and it does show that you are interested in helping, but you have to learn the right lessons from it as well. I think number one question, or one of the main questions I get asked is, do I need volunteer experience and how much of it do I need? Don't think of it as really like a checkbox that I've got that on my application, I can move to the next year. What I want you guys to do is plug in and volunteer and pull something from it. And when you can communicate that you've pulled something from it, that you enjoy helping people, that you enjoy serving your community, that's going to look really good when you're trying to get into a medical program. That's something you can build into your personal statement. That's something you can obviously build into an interview. that's very meaningful. Okay, so we've sort of figured out the field, we're starting to look at the school's requirements, we're getting closer to the field by shadowing, volunteering, helping to build our application. You want to pick your top 3 to 5 institutions to apply to. I would even probably say 4 or more. I don't necessarily think, 3 is okay. 3 is okay, but at least 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. Some things to kind of take into account there is location, admissions requirements, competitiveness, philosophy, the mission of the school. I mean, for instance, our physical therapy program is strongly looking for North Carolina residents, basically. They give a strong preference to North Carolina residents. So they accept about 30 students a year. Maybe 1 or 2 are going to be out of state. Maybe 1 or 2. But, so if you're an out-of-state student and you're applying to PT schools, well, you know that you have a chance at our school. But what are some of the other schools' missions? What are they looking for? If a lot of our programs do have North Carolina focuses. Our medical school won't accept anyone who's not from North Carolina. I think the idea being with a lot of our medical programs, why they are geared towards students from the Southeast or students from North Carolina, is that largely these programs were founded on working with underserved populations, especially in rural East North Carolina, but other parts of North Carolina that are underserved as well. So that's kind of the idea. That's the same sort of mission that our PA program has. And so, but occupational therapy, speech language pathology, it's kind of wide open. You don't necessarily have to be a North Carolina resident. They're not going to give that strong of a preference to North Carolina candidates where they're only taking, say, 2 people out of state, like the PT program. So, find the right institutions for you. They're definitely going to be differing on admissions requirements. Location, and this is where I would say visit the schools that you want to apply to. I know that's I don't know if that's a novel idea or not, but a lot of people don't visit the schools that they're applying to. I would want to meet some folks there. I would want to learn more about the program, perhaps tour their facilities. Figure out if that's a school that you want to go to. Figure out if that's a city that you want to live in. You might determine after visiting Durham that, you know what, Duke's a really cool school, but I don't know that I want to live there. I visited this school, and this school, their faculty members kind of gave me the cold shoulder. Where at ECU, they were awesome, and they were so helpful, and they wanted to answer every question that I had, and so that's where visiting those schools helps you to get some of that information. Very, very helpful there. Obviously, schools are going to differ in terms of competitiveness. And when you're picking out your 3 to 5 schools, it might be, you might even apply more than 5. I don't think you have to per se, unless there's 5 or 6 or 7 that you've really looked at that you're interested in going to. But as they differ in competitiveness, a lot of times, think about it like, is there that 1 or 2 programs that you might apply to that might be on your high end, that are on your wish list, so to speak? Are there those 1 or 2 programs that are right in your wheelhouse that you think you might be a really good fit for, and I feel confident I can be admitted to this one? And then maybe is there that 1 or 2 programs that's a backup? Any kind of combination of that thought process when you're applying it to the schools that you're planning on applying to is going to be helpful. Just kind of understanding, well, we want to strategically get those applications out there so that, well, I'm not applying to just the most competitive schools if I'm a pretty good or average or even above average candidate, because then you might not have a great shot, even though you're applying to 5 schools. So you kind of want to spread it around a little bit. Think about it. It's kind of corny, but the more lines you have in the water, the more likely you are to hit fish and catch one, and that's the idea, is getting it out there in a few different areas. We certainly feel that'll be helpful. So, cost is another big deal. This depends on what type of program you're applying to, but private school versus a state program, there's really, if you're applying to private schools that are in the state of North Carolina, in my opinion, you should also consider applying to out-of-state schools because they're going to be about the same cost. So if you're worried about tuition, but you're applying for OT school at, say, Lenore Ryan, why not look at other schools in Virginia and South Carolina or elsewhere? or elsewhere, because the tuition is going to be the same cost. So there might be a good program that's kind of out there waiting for you that you might be a great fit for. You just got to dig. You got to look. Got to look. So, any questions about that at all? Okay. All right. So let's get down a little bit too far. You've started to create your list of schools that you'd like to go to, and you're kind of, figuring things out and sorting things out based on, okay, do I want to attend that school because of its location, or do I not want to attend that school because of its location, or its competitiveness, or its philosophy and mission, or financial cost, and things like that. One more I should absolutely hit on, professional credentialing after graduation. I think this is very important, and I didn't mention this. I would definitely look at schools and their programs' first-time pass rate on their certification exams and their licensing exams. Definitely. Because you want to go to a program that you won't just graduate, but that you will then be licensed when you take your certification exam. For instance, I'll just throw this out there. Our PA program has a 100% first-time pass rate. So basically everybody who took it last year passed it and is now certified and working as a PA. Wake Forest, they were more like 91%. You might think of Wake Forest as being a great school, a very much older institution, a better name somewhat than East Carolina. But if some of their students aren't getting licensed and getting out there and working immediately, is that program really preparing them? And that's something you have to, you can glean that information from the pass rates of their licensing exams. And some of them will say we have 100% pass rate. Well, that means that someone could have passed it on their 15th time taking it. I don't know if you can take those tests 15 times or not. Probably not. But, make sure that it's first time. Because first time, that means that those students are prepared when they're getting out. Sometimes you can kind of bend the statistics in your favor and say, well, everybody here that graduates gets certified. But they might not get certified in their first attempt. All right. Next thing, step 5. Kevin is going to talk a little bit about this, but take a practice test. Take a practice test. I don't know that I would spend $200 taking the GRE. Is it about $200 now? 170. I don't know that I would spend $170 on the GRE the first time just to find out how I did without being prepared. Use the fact that Kaplan comes here and offers the practice test on campus at ECU, a free practice test. Utilize that, because that can kind of give you that information that you would learn without the $170, first of all. So taking those practice tests are going to be very, very helpful. Getting a feel for that test before you spend money, and then you put one in the books that you might not be proud of and that you're worried about schools if they see that score. Now, in my opinion, as long as your grade goes up, your score goes up the next time, I don't think it really affects you per se. But, I get emails about that all the time, that I don't like my first test score. Should I still apply, even if it goes up? Are they going to see my first score, and is that going to hurt me? I tend to think no, but why spend $170 to find out how you're going to do when you can take the practice one for free and get better prepare yourself for it? So, in that spirit, step number 6 is study. I wouldn't take it cold. I definitely wouldn't take it cold. There's prep classes. Kaplan does things like this. Obviously, the College of Business does, whether it's a study group, online resources. I know that there are websites where you can take a question of the day. Every single day you get one sent to your email. It's a GRE math question, a GRE verbal question. Whatever you can do it there. The study guides, you can find them online. You can find them at Barnes & Noble, any bookstore. Very similar to the SAT study guides. I know that most people probably get the SAT study books. If you hadn't, they have them for the GRE. And most everybody here will be taking the GRE. If you're medical school, it would be the MCAT, and any other pharmacy, dental. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it seems like everybody else would probably be GRE. All right. So obviously we want to study. I think I'd like to hear Kevin's take on this, but I tend to think that studying for a few months is better. I personally believe, after having taken the GRE a couple of times, this is not a test that you cram for. It definitely isn't. It's more of learning the test and what they're looking for, these specific types of questions, learning how to analyze these problems, whether it's in the quantitative section, whether it's in the verbal section, and coming up with that right answer and getting there efficiently as well. That is hard to do. You can't just study it for like a couple of days or even a couple of weeks and it sink in. Some of the verbal is really tough, and there's going to be a lot of words and things like that you just haven't seen. It's not, simply put, I mean, you won't be able to cram and learn these 100 key vocabulary words overnight. It's just, so I usually recommend for my advisees 3-4 months maybe beforehand. You take that practice test, you figure out what your score is, then you start preparing for your practice GRE, perhaps your practice MCAT, or not practice, the real thing. Then you take that, and then you see how you did, and then you might consider taking it again a few months down the road as well. So.
I would say we usually recommend between 2 or 3 months. It's not so much the content on the test isn't really stuff that you haven't ever looked at before. It's a lot of stuff that you've looked at, but your prep is going to really be broken into 2 parts, where it's going to be reviewing that content, remembering all the math formulas, remembering all the vocabulary, and refreshing that information. And then, it's a type of test where if I handed it to you and gave you a week to do it, everyone would do really well on it. But the hard part is the timing and the test taking strategy. And that's the stuff that it takes a while to really be able to learn how to not only approach those problems, but approach them and get them finished and answered correctly within 30 seconds to a minute. And so that's really the challenging part.
And in a room for 4 hours in front of a computer, right?
Yep.
So that's its own task in and of itself. So absolutely good stuff. He'll elaborate a lot more on this stuff. He's the expert. All right, so we're studying, then we're taking the test. All right. Next thing you definitely ought to think about are recommendations. You definitely will look at your school's requirements there. Some schools, some programs might require only 2, some might require 3, so that's something that you need to know. And then, where do I send them? If you're applying through a centralized application system, a lot of times your letter writers can send in those letters, or I've written letters of recommendation where a link is sent to me. The student applies through, say, CASPA, Centralized Application System. It's for PA students. And so I'll get sent a link because this student listed me as a reference, and then I can just copy and paste my letter, and I can put it in there and submit it that way. So kind of understand how to get the letter where it needs to go, but also, well, who do I need to ask for a letter, and how many of those do I need? Think of, there's some really good ones here. Science professors. I think a professional in the field that you've shadowed, especially if your program requires shadowing or wants shadowing or requires any kind of patient contact experience, that's going to be very important. For folks, I know that we had a few in here that are thinking about PT school. If a physical therapist says, I think this student is going to be a good physical therapist, that's a lot more meaningful than me writing you a letter saying, I think she's going to be a great physical therapist. You know what I mean? So it's all about who's writing that letter. So again, someone you've shadowed, perhaps a medical professional in the field, boss, supervisor, anyone who can speak to some of your perhaps leadership skills, leadership abilities. Maybe your work ethic. Maybe you're just the type of person that they can set their watch to, and you're always there, and you're always on time, and you work hard, and you ask for more, and those are very positive traits. Those are workmanlike traits that I think a lot of programs would look for, or that could be a meaningful letter. Perhaps it was a mentor, perhaps it was someone who oversaw volunteer experiences that you've done, whether it's at the Boys and Girls Club, director of Boys and Girls Club, or Habitat, or if it's a youth pastor that you went on a few mission trips and did things like that. Those are going to be positive as well. Again, service related. So, and we feel that broad is sort of better here as well. If you're applying to PT school, you don't want 3 biology professors. You want maybe 1 biology professor, or maybe 1 PT, and then maybe 1 former employer, or 1 person who supervised your service, or someone else who could speak to some of those abilities, or maybe even 2 people in the field, maybe 2 physical therapists and then a biology professor, or and it doesn't even have to necessarily be a science professor. We've seen students that have had an English professor write something. Maybe a psychology professor. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a natural science professor. You know, if you want to be a really good doctor or practitioner, you got to know how to work with people. You have to know how to communicate with people. What if it was a communications professor that believes that you just get it and you understand it? You know, and that can be a very positive and powerful letter. So think about those. A lot of times it's three letters of recommendations that you'll need, but diverse is better. Diverse is better than just two or three letters in a single concentrated area. And that's another thing. I'm not going to discourage you guys from asking an advisor, but what I mentioned earlier, where sometimes, like I said, a PT would write you a better letter than I could write you a letter. Get someone who you've worked with firsthand. You know, if that's an advisor who supervised some work that you were doing, or worked with you on a service project, or really knows you very well, then that can be a meaningful letter. But I usually don't necessarily like writing letters of recommendation, because all I can do is really echo what everybody else is saying about you or what you've already proven. If you're a good student, that's about all I can do. I'm almost like a secondary source. I just say, well, yeah, I mean, we meet, you know, once or twice a semester for about half an hour. I can echo that this person is shadowed. I can echo that this person has good GPAs and good prerequisite scores. But is that really a powerful and meaningful letter? Not really. So you want to make sure you get letters from folks who are a little bit closer to what you're doing. And those folks are going to be able to write more, like I said, more powerful letters. All right. So now you're going to get into writing your personal statement. This is Dear Pippin. We'll cover that after our Kaplan rep. That's obviously going to be big. And different, you know, Career Center, you can get help there. The ECU, the Writing Center, you can get help there. So those are a couple different resources. Dear obviously is with the Career Center, and she's going to discuss that at the end. All right, step 10. We're going to be applying to different schools. So again, we've narrowed the list. We've sort of determined where I would like to be, where I wouldn't like to be. You've got it narrowed down. Try to create some sort of organizational chart or a spreadsheet, something like that, where you can keep track of where I'm applying, what are their deadlines, what are their early deadlines, what are their late deadlines, is there a preferred time for me to get the application in? Do they have rolling admissions? Do they have, you can apply at any point in time, you can apply on the deadline and your application is going to be fine. If you do see anything about rolling admissions sort of basically means that as qualified applicants are coming in, they can be offered a seat. You know, now a lot of programs will do interviews. So if there is an interview for a program, say our PA program, this is the way they operate. The application cycle opens up April 1st. As they get quality candidates coming in and they want to offer an interview, they've already pulled that person for an interview. And they'll put it in the interview pile. So you might be applying before the deadline, but there might only be a few interview spots left, where the odds are in your favor if you get it in earlier. You know, there might be 100 people applying there at the last minute, and only 2 more interview spots. Where if you applied first, you know, your application might stand out more. So just make sure that you know if a program just sort of has a regular deadline or an early deadline. You know, where your application will be reviewed quicker, or if it's some sort of rolling process. And ask those questions. If it's not clear, ask. You know, there's someone who's with that program who does admissions, or there's a faculty member who's the admissions director, or perhaps even you know, an advisor who answers those questions, someone like me. Every school has got someone set up like that who can answer those questions. So if you're unsure, you're unclear about it, definitely get in touch with them. All right, Career Center obviously offers help with interviews. This is a really big deal. This is a really big deal. Sometimes for health professions committee interviews, it does not look good when someone drops out a curse word in an interview. You know, it doesn't. It's not positive. I'm sure you've seen it in mock interviews. It's not positive. You want to give off the correct body language. You want to say the right things. You want this interview to run smoothly, but you don't want to look packaged either. You don't want to look like someone just opened up a can of perfectly you know, made and crafted talking points either. You want to come off as a human being who's got a little bit of you know, a good positive vibe. So getting with the Career Center on that is going to be very, very important. You know, looking over some of the potential questions that you might be asked. You know, planning and figuring, well,